everyone. This is your host Laiba Khan, and I am back with another exciting episode of my podcast. And today I have an incredible guest with me. He is a founding director of an award-winning international practice. He's been working in the architecture and planning industry. He have an extensive experience as a design director, and he's been working all around the world, UK, China, in Southeast Asia with projects in Europe, Latin America, MENA region, and Asia. And I'm very thrilled to welcome him on my podcast. Hi, Edward. How are you doing?
Hi, Laban. Thanks for that very kind introduction.
You're welcome. So let's start with the uh, if you want to add something. What do you do about architecture? Any of your thoughts?
Yeah, sure. So I've been lucky to be the regional design director for Atkins out of the Middle East. We cover the whole MENA region. We're based out of Riyadh with an office in Dubai, in Qatar, and Oman. Currently, we're doing a lot of exciting projects both in the UAE and KSA. And I think the region currently is at the cutting edge of using technology in the kind of construction and real estate market. So it's a great testing ground for new technologies, merging the digital with the construction and real estate industry.
Mm-hmm. So, talking about your personal journey, how did you started your personal journey, and what inspired you to become design director in the field of architecture? What inspired you?
So I think my household was quite. My mom and my dad were always very quite conducive to me and my sister to engage in creative activities. So since I was a kid, I was always drawing, creating models, and such. At some point, I was going to be an automotive designer, but I ended up being an architect. I was lucky enough to win a Fulbright scholarship, which led me to do my master's at Columbia University in New York. From there, I met my first mentor, Sir Peter Cook, who took me under his wing, and with which I went to start my career in London. From London, I was based in a couple of different places with some long stints both in China and in Southeast Asia, where I was design director for Grimshaw Architects out of Kuala Lumpur. We were working for the Australian developer Lendlease, and we were precinct architects for Tundra Exchange, which is the new CBD commercial business district in the capital in Kuala Lumpur. But from there, I was very interested in this whole uh, renaissance in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. So I found a position open for regional design director at Atkins, and I took it without thinking twice. And I've been with Atkins now for 4 years.
That's incredible. That sounds great. So, talking about technology and the future of architecture, what do you what do you think that the impact of technology is going to be in the future, and what's its impact is right now?
Yeah, so in terms of, when I was in university, there was the trend, this was almost 20 years ago, there was a trend of parametrics in architecture. And we always thought that parametrics were going to change the whole architectural academia. It did influence it, but at the end of the day, it was just a tool, let's say, meaning that the core teachings and the core philosophy and practices behind architecture remain the same, and it's just they just been augmented. I'm just referencing that because last year I, for example, started using AI text to image tools to create, what I love, which is architectural ideas. And I remember I immediately texted my one of my professors from Columbia saying, "Mark, this might be a really big problem for you because the kids are going to start creating images in 1 second instead of developing a design through a whole semester." And he said to me, "I remember 20 years ago, I had a student called Ed, and he was doing parametrics, and he thought he would do architecture in a different way. and in the end it was still architecture, right? So just to say that all these technological developments from the side of the production of architecture are quite useful and actually um, expedite the way both in which we create design optioneering, but also the depth to which we can get with those designs. But end of the day, you have to be an architect in the traditional sense. Now, in
Mhm.
terms that's in terms of the production of architecture, but I do think technologies are influencing even more the other side, the side of the real estate, right? The side of how we market our designs. And before it used to be the hand sketch, then the physical model, then the rendering, or the CAD plan, the rendering. Nowadays, our clients are asking us right away for the VR set, no? So the model in virtual reality right away, right? So as things move faster in terms of technology, I think the greatest impact with our clients and people who are not inside the profession is about more direct ways of communicating our ideas.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned AR and VR. So, talking about digital twins, what impact do you see it have right now, and what it would be in the coming future?
Yeah, so so VR and digital twins, right? So I was I heard this term digital twin long time ago when I was looking at a science fiction movie. It seems the first use of the term was in the Apollo 13 mission, where when they sent the capsule in the 1970s, they had a twin of the onboard computer in the earth on Earth at NASA, simulating exactly everything that was happening, such that if there was any problem and loss of contact with the space module, you can still have a copy, a twin, effectively, of the computer on Earth, and you can track what was the problem, right? So that would be the beginnings of this idea of the digital twin. Nowadays, let's say some 10 years ago, 5 years ago, what I saw in digital twin was a continuation of BIM, right, of a building information technology. So if you imagine the Revit model, where we would have um, all the components sort of assembled live during the design process, sorry, the digital twin would be the next step. So after we hand over and complete and build the building, in some cases, we could also hand over the digital twin of the building, such that departments within the client side, such as maintenance, could actually track the life of the building, right? And in the same manner as with the space mission, they could either detect and diagnose problems faster, or even diagnose or prevent these problems before they even happen, right? But now I understand that the term digital twin is also being used in terms of AR, VR, as you mentioned, and in a way, and we're doing it in some of the big projects we have in Saudi Arabia, while we develop our working technical 3D models for coordination and development of design, we can also connect those models in whatever state they are to VR or AR, to VR sets or AR rigs, so the client and investors can see the progress of the project life. And you can even imagine in signature projects that in very exciting projects that those digital twins could even be coupled with media campaigns and apps, such that, let's say, you're doing a stadium or a big epic monumental building that's meant to attract a lot of people. Those digital twins could be even incorporated in things like apps for people, for fans to track the progress of these projects, right? So I do see it as a very, again, as a very advanced, democratic, very popular sort of tool for communicating our designs and projects.
So, do you think that digital twin will change the way how architects or designers work?
Definitely, and I think if you see the text to image tools, right, which at the moment, as far as I know, none of them are crafted for architecture. They're in general for images, right? But I am sure people like Autodesk and other big software manufacturers will soon put online some sort of version of AutoCAD or some bespoke version of text to architecture AI. And when I say text, you can even do it with your voice. So you can imagine a scenario where the architect sits in front of a big machine and they start speaking and describing the building, and the AI will create different versions, and you will go through the process. It's almost like a evolutionary process where you run iterations or re-roll the commands, and you rerun iterations of designs until you get a couple that probably very soon we'll get to a point that they're not flat images, but they're actually 3D models that you can then even 3D print. And it's not far-fetched to think of sort of from the market user point of view of a real estate service where you can imagine a cafe or a lounge where a couple or a person are invited to design their home. They put on a VR set or there's a holographic projection, and people in real time could actually build their house mentioning references that they have in mind. Like, for example, somebody might say, I really like Mediterranean architecture, 3 stories high with this amount of windows facing this way on a plot this big. And actually, the service would immediately give them already a budget. And if there is a specific site, already could start an approvals process with the council, and maybe even connect them directly to a contractor, which in this case will be a fabricator. And
Mhm.
probably that whole experience while you're sipping a great cup of coffee would be highly experiential, highly engaging, and maybe it takes you 1 or 2 hours, and you have a set of plans and approvals for your house to be built, right? So I do think that a lot of the more, let's say, everyday architecture could very quickly become automated in this sort of way.
As you mentioned that it can become automated. So talking about the environment and the sustainability. So do you think that it would play its role in that regard as well?
I think, yeah, absolutely. Especially if things are automated and already resolved and calculated. Part of the sort of example I just gave you, for sure, could have inbuilt sustainability sort of parameters from everything from your orientation and the buildup of your residence, such that is the most optimal. You could say passive house, so the most optimal energy saving dwelling possible. You can couple it with carbon footprint sort of trackers in order to make sure that all the material is as locally sourced and sustainable as possible. Then you could also think that there's another angle to it, which is to find your dream home that it's already built, so you don't have to rebuild it, right? So all of these processes, now that you're connected, right? It's almost like Uber versus taxi, right? Because
Mhm.
before, when there was no Uber and you just have to wait for a taxi, you were just randomly waiting for the chance of a taxi, an empty taxi to pass by, right? Now with Uber, you connect immediately the need with the solution, right? And those things are connected immediately. So in the same way, if you would to design dwellings or architectural projects this way, you could actually make sure that everything is as optimal as possible. Of course, nothing is going to be as optimal as not building a new building and reusing. But if you had to build a new building, probably this will be the way to optimize the sustainability angle.
Okay, that's interesting, and that's, I think, we all will obviously in future we will look what's more gonna come. Lastly, I would like to know that if somebody is starting their career in this field, in architecture or maybe in the design field, so what advice would you give to that newbie?
Well, I would say, and going back to this, the center of this discussion about technology and its influence in the architectural sort of discourse, I would say all of those tools are fantastic. I'm a and I use them every day because they save me a lot of time and they allow me to explore many things very fast, right? And I'm a very dynamic kind of designer, right? So always moving very fast and testing ideas. But I would say, as I said before, I think the challenge now for people who are starting their careers is to try to not be too seduced by the fast image too fast. I think still it's good, and the best architects and the best architecture will come out of people who actually have the basis and the foundations, who have very strong foundations, right? And who really understand how to put a building together and what is the power of architecture, meaning how can you use architecture and design in the built environment to almost as a social tool, both to communicate to the user, but also to bring happiness to the users, to convey valuable messages to the population, right? So all those things, if you only focus on the fast image generation, um, even your fast images wouldn't be as rich, right? I have noticed now that we're all posting this mid-journey AI images. You can see that there are some quite striking images, but now it's come to a point that they're all the same and they're not very interesting. As striking as they are, everyone is doing them and everyone is doing them fast. I think the challenge now with tools like that is how to set yourself apart from other people who now can create images very quickly. It's almost like before a couple of years ago, it was all about NFTs, right? And people were creating NFTs, and you had to have some knowledge on graphic design, etc. Now with Midjourney or Dali, you can create an NFT worthy image in 1 second, literally, without having any skills in design, right? Um, but you do notice that now, because it's so easy to create these images, it's really the brains behind it, the story behind it, and what you want to convey, that it's the value proposition, not so much the image itself.
Thank you so much, Edward. It was our pleasure to have you. And Narsun Studios is really looking forward to collaborate with AdCon. And I think through this podcast, many people would be able to learn a lot about digital twins and architecture. Thank you so much. It was my pleasure to have you. And this is it for today's podcast. And we will be back with another episode. This is your host, Laiba Khan, signing off.
Thank you, Lema.